Zara had been flying through space for 3 whole days when she spotted something amazing. Her small silver spaceship was running low on fuel and she needed to find a place to land soon. That's when she saw it, a beautiful moon covered in what looked like a giant garden. Perfect, she whispered to herself, checking her instruments. The moon seemed safe enough, with breathable air and no dangerous radiation. Zara was part of a special team called the Galactic Plant Hunters. Their job was to travel around the galaxy and find new types of plants that nobody had ever seen before. As her ship got closer to the moon's surface, Zara couldn't believe her eyes. The whole place was covered in the most unusual flowers she had ever seen. They weren't round or oval like normal flowers. Instead, they were perfectly shaped like hexagons, just like the cells in a honeycomb. Even stranger, these flowers were glowing with a soft blue light that pulsed gently, like a heartbeat. "This is incredible," Zara said out loud, even though she was alone in her ship. She had discovered hundreds of new plants during her career, but nothing like this. The flowers seemed to be alive in a way that went beyond just being plants. Her spaceship landed with a soft thud on a grassy area, between 2 large clusters of the glowing flowers. Zara quickly put on her special exploration suit, a lightweight outfit that would protect her from any harmful gases or bacteria. The suit had a clear helmet that let her breathe safely while still being able to see everything clearly. Before stepping outside, Zara checked her scanner one more time. The device beeped softly, showing green lights across the board. No dangerous chemicals in the air, no harmful radiation, and the temperature was perfect, just like a warm spring day back on her home planet. She pressed the button to open her ship's door, and immediately a sweet smell filled her helmet. It was like walking into a candy store mixed with the most beautiful flower garden. The scent was so pleasant that it made her feel happy and relaxed, almost like the flowers were welcoming her to their world. Zara stepped onto the soft, spongy ground and looked around in wonder. The hexagonal flowers were everywhere, some as small as her thumb, others as big as dinner plates. They grew in perfect patterns, creating natural pathways that seemed to invite her to explore deeper into this magical garden. She pulled out her data tablet and began taking notes. Discovery log. Day 1, she spoke into the device. "I've landed on an unnamed moon in the Andromeda sector. Plant life here is unlike anything in our databases. The flowers appear to be geometric in shape and emit their own light source." She walked along one of the natural pathways. Zara noticed that the flowers seemed to respond to her presence. When she got close to them, they would glow a little brighter, and when she walked away, they would dim slightly. It was as if they were trying to communicate with her. She knelt down next to a particularly large cluster of flowers and carefully examined them. The petals felt smooth and cool to the touch, almost like touching glass. But unlike glass, they were soft and flexible. When she gently pressed one of the petals, it would spring back to its original shape, glowing brighter for just a moment. "Fascinating," Zara murmured, making more notes on her tablet. "The flowers appear to be responsive to physical contact. They may have some form of basic sensory system." Hours passed as Zara worked her way through the garden, collecting samples and taking photographs. She was so focused on her work that she didn't notice the sun beginning to set. As darkness fell across the moon, something magical happened. The flowers began to glow much brighter, turning the entire landscape into a sea of soft blue light. It was then that Zara heard something that made her heart skip a beat. A low, musical humming sound was coming from somewhere nearby. It wasn't like any sound she had ever heard before. It was beautiful and mysterious, almost like a song without words. She followed the sound, walking carefully through the glowing garden. The humming grew louder as she got closer to its source. Zara's excitement grew with each step. She had a feeling she was about to discover something truly extraordinary. As she rounded a bend in the pathway, Zara stopped and stared in amazement. Flying above a large group of flowers were creatures that looked like giant bees, but unlike any bees she had ever seen. They were about the size of small birds, with wings that sparkled like diamonds in the flower light. Their bodies glowed with the same blue light as the flowers, creating a beautiful light show. As they flew through the air, The humming sound was coming from these amazing creatures. They moved in perfect formation, like dancers in the sky, creating patterns that were both beautiful and complex. Zara watched in wonder, realizing that she hadn't just discovered new plants, she had found an entire alien world filled with life forms that nobody had ever imagined. She quietly reached for her camera.
Now trying not to make any sudden movements
That might scare the creatures away. This was the discovery of a lifetime, and she wanted to document every moment of it. Little did she know that her peaceful observation was about to turn into an adventure that would change her life forever. Zara held her breath as she watched the glowing creatures dance through the air above her. The humming sound they made was getting louder, and she could feel the vibrations in her chest. It was like standing next to a giant piano while someone played the most beautiful song ever written. She slowly raised her camera, trying not to make any sudden movements. Through her lens, she could see the creatures more clearly now. They definitely looked like bees, but everything about them was different from the bees she knew. Their wings weren't the thin, clear wings of regular bees. Instead, they looked like they were made of crystal, catching and bending the blue light from the flowers into rainbow patterns that sparkled as they flew. "This is unbelievable," Zara whispered to herself. She started recording, making sure to capture every detail. The creatures moved like they were performing a carefully planned dance. Some flew in circles, others moved in straight lines, and a few seemed to be weaving complex patterns in the air. It wasn't random flight. It was organized, intelligent. As she watched, Zara noticed something even more amazing. The creatures weren't just flying around randomly. They were actually talking to each other. The humming sounds they made would change pitch and rhythm, almost like they were having conversations. One would hum in a high tone, and another would respond with a lower tone. It was like listening to a musical language that she couldn't understand but found beautiful anyway. One of the smaller creatures broke away from the group and flew closer to where Zara was standing. She froze, not wanting to scare it away. Creature hovered about 10 feet away from her, its crystal wings creating tiny rainbows in the air. It seemed to be studying her, tilting its head from side to side like a curious bird. "Hello there," Zara said softly, feeling a bit silly for talking to an alien bee. But the creature seemed to respond to her voice. It flew a little closer, and its humming changed to a softer, more gentle tone. It was almost like it was trying to say hello back. More creatures began to notice her. They flew down from their group and formed a loose circle around Zara, but they kept their distance. She could see their eyes now. They were large and multifaceted, like regular bee eyes, but they glowed with intelligence. These weren't just insects following basic instincts. These were thinking, feeling beings. Zara's heart was racing with excitement. She had studied alien life forms her whole career, but she had never encountered anything like this. Most of the creatures she had found were simple plants that grew in strange ways or tiny organisms that lived in unusual places. But these beings were clearly intelligent, maybe even more intelligent than she had first thought. The largest creature in the group caught her attention. It was almost twice the size of the others, with wings that shimmered like mother-of-pearl. This one seemed to be the leader, as the others would look to it before making any movements. The leader bee slowly approached Zara, moving with grace and purpose. "You're beautiful," Zara said softly, watching as the creature came closer. She had always been fascinated by bees, even the regular ones back on her home planet. But this alien bee was like something from a dream. Its body was covered in what looked like soft fur, but the fur glowed with the same blue light as everything else on this moon. The leader bee stopped about 5 feet away from her and began to hum in a complex pattern. The other bees joined in, creating a harmony that was absolutely stunning. Zara felt tears forming in her eyes from the beauty of it all. She was witnessing something that no other person in the galaxy had ever seen. Slowly, carefully, Zara reached out her hand toward the leader bee. She had learned from her training that first contact with new species should always be gentle and non-threatening. The bee seemed to consider her gesture for a moment, hovering in place while its wings created a soft whooshing sound. Then, to Zara's amazement, the bee began to fly closer to her outstretched hand. It moved slowly, as if it was just as nervous. about this meeting as she was. The other bees watched quietly, their humming reduced to a soft background chorus. The leader bee finally landed on Zara's palm. She could feel its tiny weight and the warmth that radiated from its glowing body. The bee's feet tickled her palm slightly, and she couldn't help but smile. This was a moment she would remember for the rest of her life, the first peaceful contact between her species and these amazing creatures. For several minutes they stayed like this. The bee seemed comfortable on her hand, and Zara was afraid to move and break the spell. The other bees had formed a circle around them there, humming, creating a peaceful atmosphere. It felt like some sort of ceremony, a welcome to their world. But then disaster struck. Zara's equipment belt made a loud beeping sound as her oxygen monitor activated its regular check. The sudden noise startled the leader bee, who had been so calm just moments before. In its surprise and fear, the bee did what any scared creature would do. It defended itself. Zara felt a sharp pain in her lower back area as the bee's stinger found its target. The pain was immediate and intense, like being poked with a hot needle. She cried out in surprise and pain, and the bee immediately flew away, its humming now sounding almost apologetic. "Ow!" Zara exclaimed, reaching around to touch the spot where she had been stung. The other bees seemed upset by what had happened, their humming becoming more frantic and worried. They flew in agitated circles around her, as if they were trying to apologize for their leader's actions. The pain from the sting was already starting to fade. But Zara could feel a strange tingling sensation spreading from the spot where the bee had stung her. She looked at her scanner, which showed that her vital signs were still normal. So she assumed it was just a regular allergic reaction that her suit's medical system would handle. "It's okay," she said to the worried bees, who were still flying around her in concern. "I know you didn't mean to hurt me. It was just an accident." The leader bee flew back toward her, hovering nearby while humming in what sounded like an apology. Zara smiled at it, showing that she wasn't angry. But as she stood there, trying to reassure the alien creatures, she had no idea that the tingling sensation in her lower back was just the beginning of something far more extraordinary than a simple bee sting. At first, Zara thought everything was going to be fine. The sting hurt for a few minutes, but then the pain went away completely. She had been stung by plenty of different insects during her travels across the galaxy, and most of the time, her body just dealt with it naturally. Her exploration suit had built-in medical systems that were designed to handle exactly these kinds of situations. "See, no problem," she said to the worried bees who were still flying around her and concerned. Circles. Their humming had changed to a softer, more apologetic tone, and she could tell they felt bad about what had happened. "I'm totally fine." But as Zara continued walking through the glowing garden, taking more pictures and collecting samples, she started to notice something strange. The spot where the bee had stung her was beginning to feel warm. Not painful, just warm. Like someone had placed a heating pad on that area of her body. She reached around to touch the spot, and her eyes widened in surprise. The area was definitely swelling up. Through her suit, she could feel that the back area was getting bigger. This was definitely not normal. "Okay, that's weird," Zara said to herself, trying not to panic. She pulled out her medical scanner and pointed it at the affected area. The device beeped and showed her vital signs, which were all normal. Her heart rate was fine, her breathing was normal, and there were no signs of any dangerous toxins in her bloodstream, but the swelling was definitely real, and it was getting bigger. Within just 30 minutes, the area had grown noticeably larger. Zara tried to stay calm and think scientifically about what was happening. Maybe this was just how her body reacted to alien bee venom. Maybe it would go down in a few hours. She decided to continue her work while keeping an eye on the situation. The bees had returned to their normal activities, but she noticed that a few of them kept flying nearby, as if they were checking on her. Every now and then, one would hover close to her and hum softly, almost like they were asking if she was okay. An hour passed and the swelling had gotten much worse. Zara was starting to have trouble walking normally because of how much her lower area had expanded. But something even stranger was happening. The swollen area was starting to glow. "What in the galaxy is going on?" Zara whispered, looking down. At herself in amazement, the glow was the same soft blue color as the flowers and the bees. It pulsed gently, just like the plants around her, almost like it was breathing. She tried to contact her ship's computer to run a full medical analysis, but when she pressed the communication button on her suit, nothing happened. The swelling seemed to be interfering with her equipment somehow. Her scanner was acting up, her camera was glitching, and even her oxygen monitor was giving strange readings. The swelling continued to grow throughout the day. By the time the sun started to set, Zara's lower area had expanded to almost 3 times its normal size. She could barely walk, and sitting down was completely impossible. She had to lean against a large rock to rest, feeling both worried and fascinated by what was happening to her body. As darkness fell across the moon, something incredible happened. The swelling began to glow much brighter, just like the flowers did when night came. Zara looked down at herself and realized she was now glowing just as brightly as everything else in this alien garden. "This is impossible," she said out loud, but her voice was filled with wonder rather than fear. She was glowing like a living lantern, pulsing with the same rhythm as the flowers around her. It was beautiful, but also very concerning. The strangest part was that the glowing seemed to be connected to the plants somehow. When the flowers around her pulsed brighter, her swollen area would also glow brighter. When they dimmed, she would dim too. It was like she had become part of the moon's ecosystem. Zara tried to make it back to her ship, but walking was incredibly difficult now. Every step was a struggle, and she had to rest frequently. The glowing was getting so bright that she could see her own light reflecting off the nearby flowers and rocks. As she slowly made her way through the garden, she noticed that the alien bees were following her. They weren't flying in their usual patterns anymore. Instead, they were moving in rhythm with her, glowing, pulsing brighter and dimmer at exactly the same time she did. "Are you guys connected to this somehow?" she asked them, even though she knew they couldn't understand her words. But their humming changed when she spoke, almost like they were responding to her question. By the time she reached her ship, Zara was exhausted, and the swelling had grown even more. She was now glowing so brightly that she could easily see everything around her without needing any artificial lights. Her lower area looked like a giant blue light bulb that had been attached to her body. She tried to get into her ship, but quickly realized that was impossible. The swelling was too large to fit through the door. She was stuck outside, glowing like a beacon in the alien night. "Great," Zara said with a tired laugh. "I'm trapped on an alien moon, glowing like a Christmas tree, and I can't even get back to my own ship." But as she sat there leaning against her ship, something amazing happened. The flowers around her began to glow even brighter, as if they were responding to her presence. The alien bees gathered around her, their humming creating a symphony that seemed to be welcoming her. For the first time since the swelling started, Zara didn't feel afraid. She felt like she was becoming part of something bigger, something magical. The glowing wasn't just a weird side effect of the bee sting, it was connecting her to this entire alien world in ways she was only beginning to understand. As she looked up at the stars above, her body pulsing with blue light, Zara realized that this was either going to be the most amazing discovery of her career or the strangest way anyone had ever gotten stuck on an alien moon. Either way, she was definitely going to have quite a story to tell when she got home. Zara spent the entire night sitting outside her ship, unable to sleep because of how bright she was glowing. Every time she closed her eyes, the blue light from her swollen lower area would shine right through her eyelids. It was like trying to sleep with a flashlight pointed at your face, but something wonderful was happening that made her forget about being tired. As the night went on, Zara began to notice things she had never experienced before. When she looked at the hexagonal flowers around her, she didn't just see them, she could somehow feel them. It was like each flower was sending her tiny messages about how it was feeling. "This is incredible," she whispered to herself, reaching out to touch one of the nearby flowers. The moment her fingers made contact, a wave of peaceful feelings washed over her. The flower was happy, content, and somehow, aware of her presence, the alien bees had stayed with her throughout the night, forming a protective circle around her glowing form. They hummed softly in harmonious patterns, and Zara was beginning to realize that their sounds weren't just random noises. They were actually talking to each other, and now, somehow, she was starting to understand bits and pieces of what they were saying. One of the smaller bees flew close to her face and hummed in a pattern that felt familiar. Zara concentrated hard, trying to understand what it was trying to tell her. Suddenly, like a light bulb turning on in her mind, she understood. The bee was saying friend in its own language. Friend, she repeated back to the bee, trying to copy its humming pattern. The bee's wings fluttered excitedly, and it flew in a happy circle around her head. The other bees joined in, creating a joyful symphony that made Zara's heart feel warm and full. As the sun began to rise, painting the sky in beautiful colors, something extraordinary happened. The largest bee from the group, the one that had stung her, approached her slowly. But this time, instead of just humming, Zara could sense what it was thinking and feeling. The bee was full of regret about stinging her, but also filled with hope. Through the strange connection that had formed between them, Zara could feel the bee's thoughts flowing into her mind. It wasn't speaking in words, but in feelings and images that she could somehow understand. The bees showed her pictures in her mind, images of this moon from long ago, when it was even more beautiful than it was now. But then came darker images, showing how the moon was slowly dying. A nearby star was sending out harmful radiation that was poisoning the soil and killing the plants. The bees and flowers were all connected in a giant network, and they were all suffering together. You're all connected, Zara said out loud, finally understanding what was happening. The flowers, the bees, even the soil. You're all part of one big living system. The large bee hummed in agreement, and more images flowed into Zara's mind. She saw how the bee sting hadn't been an accident after all. The bees had been watching her since she landed, and they had chosen her for a special purpose. The sting was their way of making her part of their network, so she could understand their problem and help them. But there was more to it than just understanding. As Zara sat there with the sun warming her face, she realized that her glowing wasn't just connecting her to the local plants and bees, it was connecting her to the entire moon. She could feel the pulse of life flowing through every living thing on the surface, and that's when she felt it. The moon itself was alive, not just the plants and bees, but the actual moon was a living creature. The soil, the rocks, the air, everything was part of one massive living being. And this living moon was in terrible pain. The radiation from the dying star was like poison flowing through the moon's body. Zara could feel the moon suffering as if it were her own. It was weak, tired, and slowly dying. The bees and flowers were trying to help, but they weren't strong enough to fight the radiation on their own. You need help, Zara said to the large bee, who was still hovering near her. You need someone to tell the galaxy what's happening here. The bee hummed excitedly, and suddenly Zara understood the full plan. The bees had been waiting for someone like her to arrive, someone who could travel between worlds and speak to other intelligent beings. By making her part of their network, they had given her the ability to communicate their desperate message to the rest of the galaxy. But there was a problem. As Zara sat there in the morning light, she could feel the connection starting to weaken. The bee venom that had caused her transformation was slowly wearing off. Her glowing was getting dimmer, and the swelling was beginning to go down slightly. How long do I have? She asked the bee, and somehow she knew the answer without being told. Maybe 3 days, for at most. After that, she would return to normal and lose her ability to communicate with the moon's living network. The large bee flew closer to her and landed gently on her shoulder. Through their connection, it showed her one more image, a massive crystal formation in the center of the moon, where thousands of bees lived together in perfect harmony. This was their home, their hive, and at its heart was the oldest and wisest. Bee of all, their queen. You want me to meet your queen? Zara said, understanding immediately. The bee hummed happily, and all the other bees began to flutter their wings in excitement. Zara tried to stand up, but her swollen condition made it difficult to move. The bees seemed to understand her problem, and they began to work together to help her. Some of them flew beneath her arms to provide support, while others guided her along the easiest paths through the garden as they made their way toward the center of the moon. Zara felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. She was about to meet the leader of an entire alien civilization, and she was the only person in the galaxy who could understand their desperate need for help. The weight of responsibility was enormous, but so was the honor. She was going to be the first human to communicate with a living moon, and possibly the key to saving an entire world. With each step she took, supported by her new bee friends, Zara knew that her life would never be the same again. The journey to the center of the moon took almost the entire day. Zara had to stop frequently to rest, as walking with her swollen condition was exhausting. But the bees were incredibly patient and helpful, always making sure she had shade when she needed it, and guiding her along the smoothest paths as they got closer to their destination. Zara could see something amazing in the distance. Rising up from the ground was what looked like a mountain made entirely of crystal. It sparkled and shined in the sunlight, casting rainbow patterns across the landscape. But as they got closer, she realized it wasn't a mountain at all. It was the largest beehive she could ever imagine. Wow, Zara breathed, staring up at the massive structure. The hive was built inside and around a natural crystal formation that must have been hundreds of feet tall. Thousands of bees flew in and out of openings in the crystal, creating streams of glowing light that looked like rivers of stars. The bees that had been helping her began to hum excitedly as they approached their home. Their humming was picked up by other bees, and soon the entire hive was creating a welcoming song that echoed across the landscape. Zara could feel the happiness and relief in their musical voices. They were bringing home someone who might be able to help save their world. As they entered the hive, Zara gasped in amazement. The inside was even more beautiful than the outside. The crystal walls glowed with their own inner light. The hexagonal chambers where the bees lived were perfectly organized in complex geometric patterns. It was like being inside a living cathedral made of light and music. The bees guided her deeper into the hive, through tunnels and chambers that seemed to go on forever. Everywhere she looked, there were bees working together in perfect harmony. Some were tending to young bees, others were processing nectar from the hexagonal flowers, and still others seemed to be working on maintaining the crystal structure itself. Finally, they reached the heart of the hive, a massive chamber where the walls were made of the purest, most beautiful crystals Zara had ever seen. And there, in the center of the chamber, was the queen bee. The queen was unlike anything Zara could have imagined. She was enormous, at least 10 times larger than the other bees, but she moved with grace and dignity. Her wings were like stained glass windows, showing every color of the rainbow. When she looked at Zara with her large, intelligent eyes, Zara felt like she was being seen by someone incredibly wise and ancient. The queen began to hum, and immediately Zara's mind was filled with images and feelings. But these weren't just simple pictures like she had received from the other bees. The queen was showing her the entire history of the moon. Going back thousands of years, Zara saw how the moon had once been a paradise, covered in crystal cities where bees and other creatures lived in perfect harmony. She saw how they had developed their incredible connection to each other and to the living moon itself. But then came the disaster. The nearby star began to die, sending out waves of deadly radiation that slowly poisoned their world. The queen showed her how they had tried everything to save their home. They had used their crystal technology to create protective barriers, but the radiation was too strong. They had tried to heal the land with their collective life energy, but they were slowly losing the battle. Many of their cities had already been abandoned, and the crystal formations were beginning to crack and crumble. "You're the last ones left," Zara said, understanding the desperate situation. The queen hummed sadly, confirming her fears. This hive was the last major colony on the entire moon, and even they wouldn't survive much longer without help. But the queen had more to show her. Through their connection, she explained how Zara could help, the transformation that had happened. To Zara wasn't just about communication, it had also made her into a living transmitter. Her glowing body could broadcast the queen's message across the entire galaxy, reaching every spacefaring civilization that had the technology to receive it. "You want me to call for help?" Zara said, and the queen hummed in agreement. But there was urgency in the Queen's message. Zara's transformation was already beginning to fade. She could feel her connection to the hive network getting weaker, and her glowing was definitely dimmer than it had been the night before. Working quickly, Zara and the Queen developed a plan, using her ship's communication equipment, combined. With her transformed body as an amplifier, she could send out a distress signal that would reach every major civilization in the galaxy. The message would include all the scientific data about the moon's condition, proof of the intelligent life living there, a desperate plea for help. With the help of several worker bees, Zara made her way back to her ship. The swelling had gone down enough that she could just barely squeeze through the door, though it was still quite uncomfortable. She immediately began working on modifying her ship's communication system. Following the Queen's telepathic instructions, the process was complicated and exhausting. Zara had to connect herself directly to the ship's power systems, using her glowing body as part of the transmission equipment. It was dangerous, but it was the only way to make the signal strong enough to reach across the galaxy. As she activated the system, Zara felt an incredible surge of energy flowing through her. Her body blazed with blue light, brighter than it had ever been before. The message began transmitting, carrying with it all the emotions and memories that the Queen had shared with her for 3 straight hours. Zara maintained the transmission, sending the moon's cry for help out into the vast darkness of space. By the time she finally collapsed from exhaustion, her glowing had almost completely faded. The swelling was rapidly going down. Over the next few days, as Zara slowly returned to normal, something wonderful began to happen. Her ship's communication systems started receiving responses from across the galaxy. Civilizations she had never heard of were responding to the distress call. Scientific ships, rescue vessels, and even entire fleets were changing course to come and help. The Galactic Council, the main governing body for spacefaring civilizations, declared the moon a protected world and organized the largest rescue operation in galactic history. Using advanced technology, they were able to relocate the moon's entire ecosystem to a safe location, far away from the dying star's radiation. As Zara prepared to leave the moon for the last time, the Queen gave her a special gift, a small crystal that contained a piece of the hive's collective memory. It would glow softly whenever she held it, reminding her of the incredible adventures she had experienced and the friends she had made. Back on her home planet, Zara became famous as the person who had saved an entire world. But more importantly, she had learned that sometimes the most amazing discoveries come from the most unexpected situations. Getting stung by an alien bee had led to the greatest adventure of her life, and she knew that whenever she looked up at the stars, she would think of her glowing friends, who were now safe in their new home. The small crystal sat on her desk as she wrote her reports, glowing gently and reminding her that even the smallest creatures can change the galaxy when they work together.